If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hi, I'm Kaylee, a college student and pretend journalist who was conceived with donor sperm in 1999. This is Message in a Bottle. Hello, welcome or welcome back to the show. I feel the need to ask how you guys are, even though you can't answer me, but I hope you're doing well and happy February. This is the 8th episode of the show, my conversation with Freya. She is British and has a fantastic accent, as you will hear. She is donor conceived, raised by two moms, and is a new mom herself to a donor conceived child with her wife. She got involved with donor conception advocacy during the process of conceiving her daughter, and we talk about living in both worlds, being a DCP and a recipient parent. Before we get to our conversation, I'll just remind you guys to follow Message in a Bottle wherever you're listening, follow the show's Instagram page, etc. Okay, here's Freya.
Nice to see
Hello.
you.
So, Freya, that's how you say it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Freya. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so you live in England?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So cool.
Yeah, quite British.
You. We're both on yellow couches of some sort. Um, okay. So yeah, I guess I just would ask for you to like introduce yourself and how old you are and where you live and your situation a little bit. Sorry.
So I'm Freya. I'm 27 and I'm in England. Um, I was donor conceived in the 90s in 1994, and anonymous sperm donor in England as per the rules at the time.
Mhm.
Um, and then I went on to find half siblings, some of my half siblings, the donor purely by chance, and my daughter is donor conceived as well. And
Right.
she's 16 months old.
6 months.
So
Oh. So are you well, I have lots of questions, so I'm just trying to think of where I should
yeah.
start. Um, so your daughter, are you a single mom?
No, I'm with my wife.
Oh,
So
wow,
we,
cool.
yeah.
I see. So, okay. So England. I don't know a lot about the differences between the way that the systems work in England versus in the States. Like,
Okay.
so what do you know like about the
When um when I was born, the rules were that there was just blanket lifelong anonymity for
Mm,
sperm donors. So they had it in 1991, I believe. They started recording all the data. So the HFEA records all data about any donor gamete, so sperm donor, egg donors. But it was lifelong anonymity. But you could apply to the HFEA for basic details on your donor, and you could also apply for your half siblings when you were 18.
I see.
Um, and you'd kind of sign up to like a sibling link, and then if they signed up too, you'd get an email or a phone call and say someone else is like it's a match.
I see.
Um, but they changed the laws in 2005. So there's no longer lifelong anonymity, it's not allowed. So all donors have to be open ID at 18. So
Oh,
anyone donating after 2005, they they agree to be found at 18. So it will be, is it next year? I think there'll be the first lot of age 18
oh,
people
right.
that will be able to find their donors. So my daughter falls into that category. So at 18,
Right.
she'll be able to find her donor. It's still very similar in terms of she gets the basic info. She gets a lot more details than I did,
Mhm.
but it's still the same. She can sign up at 18 to find siblings as well. So most of it stayed quite similar, really. It's just that
Yeah.
they don't allow the anonymity for life anymore, which is good.
Yeah, definitely. That's
Mm,
interesting that, well, the implication of if they tell you about the siblings at 18, that means that they keep a pretty accurate record of who is
mm,
born and who the vials get sold to, which is interesting because
yeah.
I've noticed that does not seem to be so present at
No,
every.
I mean, it's still quite basic information about siblings. You get a table and it literally has the years they were born and the genders.
Oh,
Um, but it's still obviously considerably more than, I guess, having nothing. But they still have everyone's details on file. It's just that,
right. They don't tell you,
no, they
but at
have to
least
wait.
they have the file, which I don't.
Yeah, that's very true. So everything is stored there. It's just getting the access to it, which is obviously part of the frustration that a lot of people have
Mhm.
with the HFEA, really, because
Yeah.
it exists and could give you so much information, and they don't. So
What does
yeah,
that stand for? H
human fertilization. No, human fertilization embryology authority. Yes, human
HFEA. Yeah, that makes
fertilization
sense.
embryology authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So,
Mm.
yeah, I guess in the States, nothing is, everybody has to do this or nobody can do this because it's all so privatized and it's like companies that buy out these different banks and they can just make up rules and do whatever they want because the FDA doesn't actually
Yeah,
enforce anything. So it's different,
it's
but
terrifying.
yeah, it
Yeah.
causes a lot of problems. But
Yeah.
so it's interesting that it is different. But there are
Yeah.
sperm donors, sperm, well, and egg donors everywhere. I didn't realize that either. That it's like a lot of countries have that, and a lot of the banks in
Yeah.
America ship worldwide, which is
Yes. Yeah. I've
weird.
met a lot of people in England that have shipped their sperm from abroad. We even considered going through Cryos, which is Denmark,
Mm,
and ended up not, because there is no way of tracking how many families are conceived really through that.
mhm.
Um, but and also there's no limit or family limit or anything. In the UK, you do have a 10 family limit in a sperm bank.
And it's
Obviously,
national that they enforce
yeah,
that. So yeah, that's
yeah,
just a lot safer because
yes,
in the US, it's just there's not like a universal consensus, and then this different sperm banks have different numbers and they don't keep track. Like California Cryobank, where I'm from, I recently found this out, is 25 families, but they
yeah.
don't
I learned
really.
that recently. 25, which is so many, and
That's just a
especially
lot of people. Like, and they're like, yeah, like
and if
it
every
ends up
family
being
has
more
three
than
kids,
that.
that's a lot. That's yeah. But
It's, but
yeah.
yeah. So did you grow up with gay parents as well, or
Yes,
you? Oh,
should have
you
said
did.
that. Yeah. So I've got two mums. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
They my because of just how laws were in the UK, my mum went to the sperm bank as a single parent. My
Hmm.
non-biological mum wasn't really um, accepted as being on the scene. Really,
Hmm.
they weren't in a civil partnership or anything like that. But yeah, they kind of knew they were a lot of it was going to gay parents, but it was sort of done as a single mum coming in
Hmm.
needing help type thing. Yeah,
Interesting. So you always knew you were donor conceived.
always knew. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't even remember having that first conversation. It was just
Me
something
neither. Yeah.
that was, yeah, which is nice. I every time someone asks how the conversation went, I'm like, well, it didn't really. It's just been in my existence my whole life.
Hmm.
And I think that's a testament to my parents, because they never made it weird. I never had a moment of, oh my god, what is this? And it gave me a lot of confidence. So if anyone was weird at school or asked those invasive questions, I kind of went into it quite like, yeah, it's normal. I don't, it's just me. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I did grow up in quite a progressive area, which was good, and there was a lot of kind of gay pride family groups and stuff like that that I went to. But I still think anywhere they gave me quite a lot of confidence, just because they didn't turn it into a thing.
Hmm.
Really, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So did you get involved in the donor conceived Facebook group or the online community because of you being donor conceived, or it was when you started to look into the
it
process
was
of having your own child?
it was kind of after. It was probably when I was pregnant, actually.
Oh.
We always knew, my wife and I knew we'd use a donor, just because that was probably one of the only ways we'd be able to have a kid, but also because I was so comfortable with how I was conceived that we had no kind of qualms going into it. We just went, I think it felt quite natural for that to be our story as well. And I would have loved to have used a known donor, but we had nobody that I trusted enough. We had no men in our life that I could say, yeah, I'm happy with him being the father of my kid. Nobody felt like they fit that role. And
Hmm.
and I really, really didn't like the idea of using a private donor off Facebook or one of these
Yeah,
private
I didn't even
sites. It's
realize that that was such
terrifying
a
me.
thing.
Yeah. And so it was kind of the only
Yeah,
way.
you need that
Um,
middleman.
yeah, and we did look at Cryos. I liked Cryos because you got pictures, baby pictures of the donor, which was quite a nice level of familiarity. I thought you don't know what they look like as an adult, but you get an idea, and it
Hmm.
was kind of, though it did make you go a bit uh what's the word, uh superficial. Everything we were looking at, you kind of, they might have a lovely profile, but if you looked at the baby picture and they were a bit of a weird looking baby, you didn't suddenly go, and that's awful and it shouldn't be the thing, but you
That's
do, I
so
guess. If you
funny.
pick someone you have a kid with, you automatically are picking someone that you like the look of, don't you? um
Right.
but yeah, so I think eventually that didn't seem, and then we found out they changed the laws, so they don't, they used to ship from abroad to home addresses, so you could do artificial insemination at home, but they changed that literally in my relationship timeline, and we hadn't noticed, and then when we went to look, we found out they didn't do it anymore, and I'd been quite against going to a clinic because it felt quite clinical. And then eventually we just went, screw it, I think we'll just go through a clinic, and actually it took all the guesswork out of it and it worked first time, so it was nice not
Easier that
having to
way.
figure it out at home.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
Seems like it
mm,
would complicate.
yeah, and there's a pressure, I think, if you get it wrong it's your fault as opposed to blaming a clinic maybe.
Right, right.
Mm.
Interesting. So, how did you guys go about picking the donor for your child?
We didn't have much of a criteria really.
Uh-huh.
We purely wanted, my wife's got very blue eyes, and we thought it would be nice to pick a donor with blue eyes so that it's the same chance of our kid having blue eyes as if me and her biologically had a kid together.
Hmm.
And that was kind of all we were interested in.
Hmm.
So we asked for all the profiles of people with blue eyes and then read them, and if they, we just went with our gut really. If we read them and went, "Oh, we don't feel a massive connection to the person," um, and then we read ours, and I think we liked him, and we said we'll hold him to one side, which is how they did it, and then looked at a few others and then went, no, actually we'll go back to him.
Hmm.
um, I mean, occasionally I joke that he sounds a bit pretentious in his profile. He kind of is a marathon runner and he's training to be a surgeon and all of these kind of yeah, like, and but he says specifically he wanted to help the LGBT community, and I think that was a big draw. I've always sort of said I don't want, when my daughter is 18 and does get to find him, it would be horrible to find out that he was homophobic or
Yeah,
something like that, which does happen. I think people think that, of course not, they're donating sperm, it's going to go to gay couples, but even my own donor said he never considered the fact it could go to gay couples. It was sold to him as it will go to couples that are struggling to have a child.
right.
He never for 1 minute thought it will go to gay parents. He just, no, he wasn't homophobic, but he just didn't think of it.
Yeah, it didn't even, yeah, which demonstrates like how different things were 27,
Definitely.
20. Yeah, it's the same.
With so little info given to them, so little explanation really. They just kind of, I mean, he's told me he did it because he needed to pay the rent, which
Uh-huh.
I grew up guessing that. Actually, I knew he was a student, and I was like, yeah, he probably was a bit skint, and he was, and I'm quite glad he never lied about that. Actually, when I
Hmm.
found him, he just was honest, which was nice, really. But yeah, he jokes it was the Wild West then in terms of donating sperm. There was no, it was so casual. It was like he was mates with the guy that ran the clinic. That was kind of it.
Yeah, that's the thing I keep hearing people talk
Yeah,
about. Like, oh, it was my neighbor, it was my
yeah,
friend.
yeah. He dragged along his flatmate as well, and
Oh my God.
it was interesting. My parents picked my donor because they liked the sound of him being a street performer, which was, they were both musicians, so they were
Oh.
like, that would be nice to have someone that's got that background as well. And that was one tidbit of information I was given growing up, and I loved it. I thought it was really cool. And every time I went to like Camden Market in London,
Hmm.
because they used a London clinic, I always thought, oh, I'll just see if there's anyone that looks like me or anything. And that grew up doing that. And when I met my donor last year, I said to him, oh, it said that you were a street performer. And he was really like, what? No. He's like, I don't play anything. Never done that. And the more we talked, his flatmate, who he donated at the same time as, was a street performer. And so it was all word of mouth, and they just chatted about it. And the nurses had said to my parents, oh yeah, no, he's a street performer. And they just
Oh
got
my
the wrong guy
God.
in their head.
That's
And that was
wild.
26 years of me having that in my head.
Yeah, and it
um
like shapes of how you think
Totally.
of a person. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So was it fresh and not frozen?
That's a very good question. No, I think it was frozen. No, because he donated in a different city, and then
Oh, I see.
they used it in London. So yeah, no, frozen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Huh. That is funny. I know what you mean. Like my donor he's a musician, also like a
Yeah.
saxophonist and that whole
Oh,
thing. And
see,
I
mine does play the saxophone. That's the only thing he does play,
really,
actually.
that's
Yeah.
funny. So maybe it's like a weird thing that all saxophone. No, no. But I didn't
No.
know that. Like I knew he was a musician, but I didn't know
Right.
he played the saxophone. And then in band in fifth grade, when we got to pick what we wanted to do, I decided to play the saxophone. And I came home, and my parents were like, "Oh my God, like that's what he did," And I was like,
That's so
"Oh, wow."
cool.
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Mhm.
So I was trying to think. You. Oh, so you said something about you ended up meeting your donor through, what did you say, coincidence or?
Yeah. So I did one of the standard genealogy kits years ago. And it was years ago. It was like 2016 maybe. And it was really basic back then. So you literally, I got it back and it just said my kind of heritage in terms of like England, whatever, like I was mainly curious to know, because obviously I didn't know half of my heritage. So I thought it would just be nice to know if I go back to anywhere and interesting in the world. And I got that back and it was fairly interesting, and then I kind of forgot about it. But I had the site still, so occasionally I'll get emails saying you have a relative match, and actually you click on it, it's a fifth cousin or something.
Mhm.
But it just pops up constantly. And I got one pop up saying you have a new match, and it was a second cousin, and I was like, oh, that's quite close actually. And he messaged me, and he was in Canada. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know much of my family is in Canada. Don't think any of them are. And he was really interested in his family tree. So when he heard, obviously, I'm not going to know half of it, he was like, oh, can I do some digging? I want to find out where we're matched. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. And he talked about GED match. So he was like, it's easier to actually figure out the connection using that. So he helped me upload the data onto GED match. And then when it came back, he said, you actually have a connection closer than me,
Mhm.
but I have no relation to them. So obviously they were on two sides of the family. And he was like, maybe drop them an email, because on GD Match you get the email address. And I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
all right, that's fine. And I was like 30 weeks pregnant at this time, and I didn't really care. And I was just like, that, yeah, it's a random cousin. And I was quite interested in doing my family tree, but that was about it. And this woman came back and she said, oh yeah, it's my son's DNA that you've matched on. We're in America. And I was like, right, well, I really don't know anyone in America. So, and she was like, the more we talked, she was like, I think I know who your biological father is. And I was like, right, you're okay. I was like, you
Like,
are a
why
random,
would you? Yeah.
why would you know? And she didn't embellish. That was it. She just sent that in an email and then vanished. Um, and then months went by and I forgot completely about it. And then I got an email in the middle of the night when I was up doing a night feed. And it was her saying, yeah, my hunch was correct. I got him to do one of the family DNA kits. He's come back as a paternal match. Here's his email address. And it was her nephew by marriage. And she just happened to know that he had donated sperm in the 90s and had a hunch. And so I got his email address in the middle of the night. So,
Oh wow. So
really,
your DNA matched your your father's like
my
nephew?
father's, un- mm, father's. uncle's son. No, I can't even. Some weird. His my donor's uncle had moved to America years ago and got
Uh-huh.
married and had kids out there. So it, and then his wife, now ex-wife, had uploaded the kids' DNA onto it. So it wasn't her; it was her kids that had matched with me, that
Uh-huh.
she was doing the digging. Um,
Oh wow.
and she even said in an email the first time, she said, oh, he's very shocked to find out that he could have a daughter. And I said to my wife, I was like, what did he think was going to happen when he donated sperm?
I know these people, a lot of them just do not. It's like,
Don't
well,
have
then
any.
what are you doing it for? Like, that's
Yeah,
just so, yeah.
yeah, no connection there. And he was so shocked. And I had to tell him that there wasn't just me, there was me, my sister, and we discovered two half siblings at that point. And I knew there's 15 of us. So I said, oh, well, actually, there's 15 of us. And one of his first questions that came back to me was, I thought there was a 10 child limit. And I was like, no, there's a 10 family limit.
Oh my God.
That doesn't mean there's 10 children. And that was his first. I was like, would 10 be better? I
Yeah.
don't. So it's still quite a lot to come at you to say hi. But yeah, he got used to it quite quickly after that, I think. But the initial shock was a lot, I think.
For him, which is funny. That it's
Yeah,
like
I just
shocking.
yeah, I
Right, like
don't
you
know
were
what that.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you must have thought, but he said it was constantly drilled into them that you will never have any contact with any children born from this, and you'll never know where they are and all this. So I think he kind of just really was so taught, don't think about this
Yeah.
anymore.
You're so detached from it, which
Yeah,
is, they,
yeah,
yeah, that's part of how
definitely
they
by
get people
design.
to do
Yeah,
it, I think. Like part of how they market it to people of like, this won't
yeah,
really
exactly.
actually matter at all. Like,
Yeah,
it,
yeah, it's got no consequences at all. Go for it.
right.
Yeah.
Literally. It's
Mm.
wild. So how did, oh, so you knew that the number was 15 in the end because you got that list?
Yes, I got that list when I was 18. I got
I see.
yeah,
Did
so I
that
moved on first.
surprise you or make you feel weird?
I'd always known there would probably be a few of us, but never knew the number. And then I think I do remember being told there was a 10 family limit. So I think in my head there was 10 as well, even though there's me and my sister who are full siblings.
Hmm.
I don't know why I didn't think that other families might have done that as well. Um, and then the first siblings we found were also full siblings.
Hmm.
Uh, and then the next lot of siblings we found were also two full siblings. So we've got three pairs of us now,
I see.
and we haven't found the rest. I don't know if we will, but yeah, every season that they do all these genealogy kits for Christmas, I tend to keep an eye out on my emails. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, that
Mm,
is wild.
yeah.
To know, but to know the final number, but not know who they are. That's interesting. It's like,
Yeah, I
well,
think that's the strange bit, because I think maybe if I didn't, I know you'd sort of wonder still, but I think not knowing that they were there would potentially be easier, because I think now knowing that they're out there, but I don't know where, I don't know if I'll ever know them. Like for example, I am born down south in England, grew up down south, but my donor actually donated up north, and he is from down south. He just donated up north because he was at university up
hmm.
north. So he's now moved back home, lives down south. I've moved up north because my wife is from up north. So we've just switched. And then I found my siblings and they live almost down the road from us, type thing. Like they're literally a sort of town over.
That's wild.
But I was born miles away. Um, and then one of my half sisters is gay. And it's like we could have matched on a dating app or something, like,
Uh-huh.
we're in the age limit where we could have had each other as a match. And just things like that is so, I know obviously we wouldn't procreate, but the fact that it's the chance you could meet someone, and have no clue. I always try and drill into people when they talk about it, because I'm like, you have to realize how weird it is that they could be walking around and anything could happen. And I know they go on about the HFEA always have this thing where they say, oh, you can apply to us if you think you could be siblings and you're dating, and we'll do a test, or
Oh.
like we'll tell you if you have got a link. And it's like, but who? not everyone knows that they're donor conceived. So I
Right,
don't know
that's the
how.
big that's the
Yeah,
biggest
it's
issue,
the
yeah.
HFA are massively assuming that every single person out there knows when they're donor conceived. Despite the fact that in the 80s it was normal to say, well, pre 1991, doctors was told to tell them, yeah,
Never tell your kid, yeah.
yeah, never tell your kids. My two of my half siblings didn't know until they were teenagers.
Mhm.
So it's that kind of yeah, the assumption that we'll, oh, that's fine. We'll just, if I meet someone, we'll both know we're donor conceived, so we'll check. But we won't, you know. And the
Right.
likelihood is, I think I've come to the conclusion that the rest of my siblings probably don't know that they're donor conceived. I think because there is such this drive in the UK that at 18 you can sign up, and I was the first to sign up at 18, and I was one of the oldest, so I always knew, well, okay, I'll sign up. The rest might not have turned 18 yet. um, and then as the years went by and I realized all of them have now turned 18, but
They
no one
haven't
else.
done it, then maybe they don't even
Yeah,
realize.
just
Yeah.
started to think potentially I might never. I think now if I do find any of them, it will be through an ancestry kit, really,
Mhm.
which is a shame. I don't think that's a way to find your family, but
Yeah,
probably
that's
anyway.
it seems so I can't imagine that happening because like what you were saying, it's you've always just known
Yeah,
that you're
yeah,
related to the one mom, you're not biologically related to the other, you came from a like
yeah,
but the so I can't even imagine the concept of like having a mom and a dad in the first place, let alone having
yeah,
that and then finding out that they were lying to you for so long and
yeah.
having it on a DNA test. Like I bet, yeah, from
And
what
it
I
feels
can
like
gather, it's very
secrecy.
overwhelming.
Yeah, like two of my half siblings, they sort of found out as teenagers that their dad isn't their dad, and so they haven't told him that they found the donor, that we
Hmm.
found the donor by accident. I had to have that conversation with them when I found him, which was really shit actually, because I became the messenger and I had to suddenly let, you know,
Hmm.
three siblings we only knew at that time know that I'd found him, and I felt really responsible, which I hated because it's not a job I should have had. Um, but yeah, they won't tell him because they don't want to hurt him, and so it turns into this secret, and then it just is, it's hard because yeah, I don't like having to hide anything. I've never been that kind of person. I've always been
Hmm.
so, you're probably the same, because it was so normal. I didn't really give a crap who knew.
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah. I'll
quite
tell
open.
anybody that it doesn't
Yeah,
bother me. Yeah.
I chat about it. I chatted about it at school a lot. I kind of, in my head, the more people I talk about it, even if it's awkward for me, more people know and more people are educated on how it's. So I kind of took it as a mission when I was a kid and just sort of went, I'll just talk about it loads. And then since having my daughter, I've gone back to talking about it even more. I wasn't in all of those Facebook groups and stuff until I was pregnant.
Hmm.
And then the boom of how the emotions of other donor conceived people took me by surprise.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. I was like, oh,
Weird.
none of you
Yeah.
knew. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it
And I
totally
was like,
changes
I
the.
just thought everyone, very narrow-minded, but I thought everyone would be like me.
Hmm.
um, and and I thought most people would have gay parents. So I thought that was, and I don't know why. Well, it was, I do know why. It was just how I was raised. So in my head, it was, yeah, everyone would have the same format of family.
Hmm.
And a lot of anger, and I understand the anger, but the anger is shocking when you first get into the
Hmm.
groups, and then I started feeling weird that I wasn't angry, and I still do. I still feel very strange that I don't necessarily have any ill feelings towards my parents for using a donor, or my donor for donating, or anything like that. I have ill feelings towards the system and the industry of it,
Hmm. Yes.
but yeah, I think it made me feel very lonely in those groups, because I was also a recipient parent, and so
Right.
I was going, I feel really guilty even though I
You
am donor conceived,
and
and I
you're
can have my
okay.
own,
Yeah.
yeah, and I can have my own thoughts on that, but then it felt like I lost the status kind of, and they just saw me as only a recipient parent a lot of the time. Yeah, and that makes me feel weird, and that as well, because it feels like my voice isn't very loud. I'm not, um I don't go in guns blazing with things. I like talking about it, but all the voices that were in there were very loud. But it sort of, yeah, I didn't feel like I could, I felt like I was sort of putting my hand up at the side and being like, I actually have views and they're valid and I can say them. But even now I still feel very much like I'm both and neither,
Mm,
which is a weird place to be. But I think I'm just learning how to sit in both worlds a bit.
right.
Yeah. Mm.
I I find it interesting the people that I can understand being angry at the person who became a donor because of sort of like what we were talking about with feeling like they had no foresight of like, oh, I'm just going to do this thing and not care about the consequences. Like I could understand that level
Yeah.
of anger, but it's interesting to think about people being angry at their parents that raised them unless the lying comes into play. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the lying is a big driving force for the anger, really. I think that,
Right.
but then I've also met, I think it's the internet personally, but I think that a lot of people will exist quite sort of comfortably in their own knowledge of being donor conceived, and even if they maybe find out a little bit later or something, but they've come to terms with it. But then the internet and groups will kind of sort of fuel that, and suddenly people that maybe weren't massively angry before
Mhm.
um, are learning more, and maybe learning that they should be angry, I think, by some people, because the angrier voices are the loudest, which is, and I sort of always, people sort of say to me like, well, we're allowed to be angry, and I'm like, no, of course you are, and I get that, but I think that there has to be a balance. I think that you can't just go in guns blazing and not listen. If someone is coming across, I remember seeing a comment on something, and it was like, it said, oh, you never share the voices of the well-adjusted people. And I was like, well, I like to think that everyone's well-adjusted, actually, but also, like, it shouldn't be a battle between if you consider yourself well-adjusted or not. Like, it
Right.
should be that we're all talking, really.
Right. It's just a conversation about something that
Yeah,
both have in
yeah.
common.
No one's
Yeah.
right. I think that's the thing. It's no families are the same, no experiences are the same. We can be very similar, but no one is going to have exactly the same um pathway, really. It's
Right.
just not possible. But yeah.
But yeah, I feel like there's also this interesting idea that people that speak up against the industry of sperm donation and
Mm.
they are angry and stuff get accused of being homophobic or that
Yes,
it's which
I
I
know that's
find that
actually
interesting. Like I don't know if I can
do.
quite wrap my head around that.
No, no, I'm the same. It's that kind of thing where I all this- I I think that I remember seeing one thing that was sort of the solution from people that were donor conceived and upset about it. The solution was, if you're going to use a donor, so to gay people, like, if you have to use donor, use a known one. And I sat with that for a really long time, and I was like, it makes me feel frustrated that that is the kind of answer when there is the, there is no blueprint for how to do it right. I've known people that have used known donors and then had custody battles. I've known
Yeah.
people that have used known donors and legal issues have sprung out of nowhere, or it's been dangerous, or you know, that I've learned about so much since having my daughter. But things like, you can get lawyers to draw up agreements and they don't stand in court. Like, if you actually then went to custody battles, that agreement doesn't really mean much.
Mhm.
Um, and it sort of made me frustrated that people that were donor conceived but then would never have the experience of having a child that way were kind of just saying, well, this is how you fix it, and this is how
Yeah,
you,
yeah, like telling people what to do.
yeah. And it's like, and a lot of those people are heterosexual,
Mhm.
and potentially in may not ever need to use a donor because they may have functioning reproductive parts when they want children. um and yeah, it's that kind of closed-minded of that's really not, I have very few male friends, and the concept of just going, yeah, sure, because I know him, that's safer to do that. um
Yeah,
and it
somehow that feels riskier in certain ways.
Yeah, definitely for me. And I spoke to my parents about it, and I said, did you ever consider any other way? Like, did you consider a known donor? And my biological mum passed away a few years ago, so all of these conversations with my non-biological mum, but she said that my mum said absolutely not using a known donor, because she was terrified that he would just turn around one day and say, I'm going to take her away.
Mhm.
uh, And she said no, especially in the 90s, like, you know, the courts wouldn't look fondly on gay couples.
Mm.
There weren't protective things in place. And she just said it's absolutely too risky. And I kind of found, when I was thinking about that, I was thinking, no, I feel that fear completely. The idea that someone that I have no relationship with, there is no trust there in that sense, could play a part in the biggest thing in my life.
Right.
um, and I'd have to trust him with that, is no, that's, it was never an option. And I'm sure it works incredibly well for some people, and I'm very jealous of that. I'm very
Mm-hmm.
jealous of the people that have that connection and that functioning family. I think it's great. But there has to be an ethical way of using open ID donors that works, and hopefully we'll get there. For example, medical information, stuff like that, still isn't where it should be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, at least in the UK, we do have some regulations, and
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
seems sort of different.
Yeah,
But
it
yeah,
really
it is still, it seems like there are parts of the American system that I still am like, it seems questionable, but at
is.
least it's less questionable than it was 20 years ago, like just based on my
Yeah, the
like basic
infancy.
levels of research. It's like, oh my.
Yeah, you can see that it's not where it was.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I find it very interesting talking to my donor about it. He wanted to see the profile that we
You
looked
got
at
to
with my
see.
daughter's donor, because
Oh,
he wrote his own as if he was writing a profile then, because he was like, all I got then, he said was hair color, eye color, occupation, and like vague, were you sporty, you know, that kind of thing, and that was it. um and so he was like, I want to have a go at trying to write the same kind of profile that we read, because we had paragraphs written by the guy of saying like,
oh, that's nice.
which is lovely. Yeah, it was sort of saying, and there's a little letter at the end to any future children.
Oh wow.
um and so he did one, because he was like, I want to try and do that for you. And I was like, but I know you now. And he was like, yes, but it feels like that should have existed sort of 27 years ago. And I was like, it was really sweet. I've got it sort of in a drawer. He's handwritten it and everything. But yeah, it's very interesting to compare the systems now. um and and it's a bit scary, actually, looking back at what my parents had to just agree to have a
Mm-hmm.
kid. There was no, I thought that they'd kind of read profiles and stuff, but all they really said was, we want this, and the doctors went, yeah, this one matches it, and they just kind of go with it.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah,
um Scary. Yeah.
it is scary. But and it's a different kind of scary because there's I've heard some people make the argument of if you have if you sleep with a random guy and you end up pregnant, you have that same amount of limited information about them. Like you didn't get to pick out of a
Right.
book of people, you know, but it's not like, well, you did that to yourself. But I'm saying like it's not like when you go to a doctor's office, you think of it as being clinical and they know what they're doing and there's a level of trust involved. So it's kind of weird to think about it.
Feels safer,
Uh-huh.
because anything in a kind of clinical setting, like you say, it feels like it should be safer.
Right, and
uh,
that's just misleading for a long
yeah.
time.
And I think I realize now I was quite naive, because maybe because it worked out okay for me. I'm healthy. I haven't inherited any illnesses that I know of. And I had a good relationship still with my parents and all that. So I think I went into it being really naive. And then the more I've learned, like I kept saying to people, oh yeah, but there's a 10 family limit. And then I read an article, and it was a very recent article, and it was a straight couple that were struggling to have a baby, and they couldn't afford going to a clinic, and getting it on the NHS in England, whilst possible, there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and people have a long waiting list. And they said, we found a donor on one of these sites, and we're just going to do it that way. And when they talked about him, they said, oh, he had been a sperm donor, registered sperm donor, but he'd hit his family limit and he wanted to keep going. And so and I was just, I turned to my wife and said, how are we ever going to know that our donor has stopped? Like,
Uh-huh.
what if he got a taste for it and decided, yeah, I want to donate everywhere? There is absolutely no guarantee. There is absolutely nothing stopping him doing whatever the hell he likes.
Mhm.
Um, And I think that I'd put a lot of trust into, well, he's gone through something official and he's done all this and he's signed these forms, and people lie. And I think I'd kind
Mm-hmm.
of course, I've got to spend the next 18 years hoping that he hasn't. But in reality, it's purely just trust in that and wait
Right.
and see, really.
Yeah, I
Um,
just spoke to a woman who is around your age, my age, who was conceived. They use it. Her parents use like a small sort of regional sperm
right.
bank, and then he ended up becoming a donor for a different sperm bank, and now she has 50 siblings that are like 5 years old.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
It's crazy, like.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
even, because obviously a lot of people in England get sperm shipped over, and you can get treated in a clinic in England with with sperm shipped from another country,
Hmm.
as long as it's registered and all this. But there's no family caps on that. So if you use the European sperm bank, there is no, yeah, it's a 10 family limit in the UK, but you don't know how many other countries or anything like that. If it went to America and there's no limits there, and they could, and the more I started learning about that, the more I just went, oh god, we really are just trying to fool ourselves that we've picked the safer option. And I just don't think there
No,
is
if they're,
one.
yeah, exactly.
Can't find a perfect solution. I don't know if one exists. um I think we're just gonna have to take it and see how it goes. Which
Hmm.
is blind trust, really.
Yeah.
Mm. But most of parenting is that anyway, so we've just got
Yeah,
to
exactly.
yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
come with a handbook.
Uh, but I am relieved that at least I can give my daughter a lot more information now.
Hmm.
Even just that profile that's got paragraphs, it's much more than I ever had growing up. I sort of
Hmm.
memorized the information I was given, and that was literally hair color, eye color, and that was
Hmm.
pretty much it. Um, and I remember thinking to myself, I lost the donor number a long time ago for my donor because I lost all the paperwork in a move. And I'm sure it could apply to the HFEA, but it's a real pain in the ass doing that. They take years.
Wow.
Um, and I remember thinking to myself, if I ever wanted to sign up on those, like the donor sibling registry, all those sites, you need the donor number. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, even if I just gave the information, I know it's so basic, it could fit any
A
number
lot of
of
people.
donors.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, there is really, I'd see these people posting like, oh, I use this donor in this place. And my parents can't even remember the bloody sperm bank they went through, the clinic. They just go, it was in London. And I'm like, well, that's
Uh-huh.
great. But there's a lot of clinics in London. And they're like, well, it was, I can picture the street and that's it. And I don't. So they still don't know what clinic it was through. Um, so
But
yeah,
yeah,
there is.
that's even the difference isn't even just that your daughter has paragraphs and you had a line of
Mm,
information. It's like you spent time in this community of people hearing other perspectives and reading a lot about it. Whereas I feel the same way. Like my parents are like, well, this was so long ago. I don't remember the details. I'm like, the details? Like this is your kid, like the
the thing.
formation of your child. It's so bizarre to
Yeah,
me.
I know. I've questioned my other mum so much, and I've just gone, surely you knew. Like, and she'll go, well, it was ages ago. And I'm like,
Right.
well,
It's
yeah,
like, what? Wouldn't you
you
remember
made
that?
me.
Uh-huh.
Like, this was a big thing in your life. And they can't even remember, like, because I was trying to, because I'm writing at the moment, I'm writing a book. So I'm like, I'd really like to have some of these details finely tuned when I'm writing it. And she'll go, oh, well, maybe this happened. And I'm like, well, that's completely different from what you told me a week ago. And I'm like, and she's like, I was like, because they kept telling me they wanted a sibling because there's 4 years between me and my sister.
Hmm.
And they said they wanted a sibling, and then they were told, they got a phone call saying we need to hurry up because they were going to have a larger gap, and then they were told you need to hurry up because if you wait any longer you won't be able to use this donor. And I said, well, why? Do you remember why? And she was like, well, I don't know, I guess he'd run out. And I was like, but if I don't understand how he could have run out if he was still donating. And then she's like, oh, well, maybe they reached the maximum time they could hold it. I was like, no, that's 10 years and you'd have
Hmm.
4 years and all of this. And there's just no answer. And I was like,
Right.
I'm going to try and track down this clinic, but there's no real paperwork. Everything was kind of word of mouth. Like my
Yeah.
donor knew the guy that he worked at the clinic with, and he even sent him an email once he found me. And the response he got was lovely, but incredibly generic. It was a guy sort of going, well, I set up the clinic because I wanted to help couples that needed it, and it was so, I was like, my God, the amount of people you've just churned out and given a baby to. And yeah, just so casually.
Yeah, it's this like level of,
Yeah,
and it's
I
this,
mean,
yeah, that like lost information. And then if you go or not generations, God, decades back further from the 90s, and it's these people that maybe their parents that raised them are dead, or like it was so long ago that they have nobody to ask, or like the clinic no longer exists, or all of the
yeah,
there was never records and it's all gone, and that's just such a weird
yeah.
thing to think about. It's the same way
It's
about how people that are adopted and they would have
yes,
no idea of how to figure that
no.
out.
You just kind of figure it must exist somewhere, but I think you start to realize that it doesn't for a lot of people. And yeah, that is quite scary. I mean, I remember when I just given birth, and it was literally like a week or so after giving birth, and I got a phone call from the clinic that we use saying we need to register her birth with the HFEA. And I had to give all her details, and it was even things like, what kind of birth was it? Like, did you have a C-section? Was it a natural birth? And they registered all of that, and I was sitting there going, right, well, am I going to know all of that about her siblings? I was like, where are you just keeping all this
Yeah,
information?
why?
Would
Yeah.
you want to know? And even like the hospital I gave birth at and things like that. And I was just thinking, well, that's great. And I don't mind giving it because I kind of want it to be there, sort of. But yeah, really interesting to kind of go, why have you got all of this wealth of information and I don't know what you're doing with it?
Yeah, I wonder
And
what they would respond if you,
you'd
not
think there's
they like that person on the phone, but they in general, like
they seem
what?
quite closed off. Anytime that anyone's had anything to do with the HFEA, they've just kind of had a, well, me and a couple of other donor conceived people are starting a kind of campaign to essentially make it a public awareness style thing for anybody that donated pre 1990, no wait, pre 2005, sorry, so
Mhm.
in between 1991 and 2005. They were told they had lifelong anonymity, but they can now remove their anonymity, and if they
Yes.
remove it, then we would all get phone calls, saying your donor has appeared. But they never made that public. They never talked about it publicly. So my own donor had absolutely no clue he could have done that. So we're just trying to find a way of making it public knowledge as such, even just so if someone reads a newspaper, they go, oh, that's interesting. Oh yeah, I did that 20 other
Uh-huh.
times.
Oh, remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of, I think it's trying to find a way of reaching people that, like we said, it's so casual and so forgotten about potentially.
Mhm.
But there's so many that I've not got the statistics annoyingly, but it was an insane statistic of people who have actually removed their anonymity. It was something like under 10% of people that have done it.
Right.
And the rest, it's all sat there, all the information sat there. They could now. There is nothing stopping them from, meeting all of these people that they've helped create. And they just don't know about it. So
Right, they
it's,
don't know about it. It's not even that they
yeah,
don't want to, because maybe some people still wouldn't want to, which is,
yeah, of course.
you
And there's
sign
a
that
great deal like
contract,
that
but
in the world.
yeah, they
Yeah,
might
it was the
want to.
first line of my email actually to my donor. I said, like, yes, okay, we've been put in contact through this random aunt, but you signed up for lifelong anonymity. So if you don't want anything to do with me, whilst it might be a bit shit, I would get it. Like, I think
Uh-huh.
I'd grown up my whole life going, well, that's what he had chosen as such. I mean, chosen's a weird word because
That was just
there
what
wasn't
everybody
an
did.
option. Yeah, it was just you had to. But I also knew that he could have done that for the very reason that he was like, but I never want to find
Mhm.
anybody. Um, so it was hard. I had to kind of, even when he responded enthusiastically, I had to keep reminding myself that he has his own, he could choose to say he has no interest in contacting
Mhm.
me. Um,
So
but
you reached out to him and he was open to it pretty early
yeah,
on?
he was so straight back with a long email. And we now have FaceTimes every other week, and I'm seeing him for the third time next week. So we've got a really nice relationship. But I think that was a big eye opener for me in terms of this should be how it's done. You should have knowledge of the person that's, half of your genes. It doesn't have to be this really close relationship. I think I remember loads of people asking me afterwards, like, oh, does he feel like your dad? And he's like, well,
Yeah,
he's
that's
not
a question.
my dad.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's hard to explain to people. I still have people calling him my dad, and I'm like, no, It's like we get on very well, but he will never be a dad. He is dad to two children that are his children.
So
And
he ended up having.
yeah, he's got two kids. They're quite young and they don't know about me yet.
Oh wow.
Uh, I'm hoping they do at some point.
Oh right,
But
because he was young when he
yeah,
he
he
was
was in
so
his
he's not that much older than you, I guess. That's interesting.
yeah.
Like
So
20
yeah,
years or older or something like that.
he was really quite young. I think he was like 21 when he donated. So yeah, he's gone on, and his kids are now sort of teenagers. But yeah, I think people assume now that, like, well, now you know him, he's your dad. And it's like, that's not what it took to be a dad. It's
Yeah,
not
it's not what
his
that means.
name. That doesn't make the relationship change. But yeah, that definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things. I now use the term biological father quite a lot rather than
Hmm.
donor.
Yeah, that's something I've had to get more used to because my mom, who my non-biological mom, used to get kind of touchy or irritated when people would say her dad or your dad, definitely, or even father or biological
Yeah.
father, like it's the donor, and it's like, well, actually, we know his name and he's been at the house, so we don't have to call him like this title
Yes.
of
Yeah. I remember people being like, "Oh, what are you going to call him now?" And I'm like, "Well, his name."
right.
That's what I'm going with now. And I do sort of dib dab between like biological father, donor. I've
Hmm.
spent 26 years using the term donor. It's weird to shift
Yeah.
out of it now. But it's yeah, I think people just, even for the fact, like, I say my other mum, my non-biological mum, but I would never call her mum. She isn't a mum, like that, because it's a status. It's a how you were raised with them. And so when people say your mum, I get really confused, because to me my mum is the one that's passed away. And my other mum, I have a name for her. I call her Gaggy because it was my first word.
That's so
um,
funny.
so that's I know, and my daughter now calls her that as well, which is great. But yeah, it's funny, the names people kind of just like to give you the nuclear family.
Uh-huh.
I think that it's easier to do, and it's like it's so much more complex than that.
Hmm. Yeah, the
Yeah.
naming thing is interesting. People
Mm.
will, oh yeah, that was a common question when you say I have two moms, and they're like, well, what do you call one of them, and what do
Yeah.
you.
Surely if you say mum, they both appear. It's like, oh.
Uh-huh. And
Yeah.
sometimes when I tell stories, I'll say my mom, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking of the one in my head, but no one knows what I mean. So
Yeah.
they have this weird, it's like, wow, your mom sounds so multifaceted. Like she's from South Africa and Brooklyn, like at
Really?
the same time. It's like they're two different people I'm referring to,
That's
but I
amazing.
forget to explain that there's a difference. It's
I
funny.
like the idea of just one super mum.
Yeah, it's like yeah, it's like she's a doctor and it's like these things, and people are like, wait, I'm confused.
That's amazing. Yeah, I use the term other mum, because I just adapted, because I think realized when I tried to say my non-biological mum that didn't carry me but has raised me, it's too many words. So
Uh-huh.
so yeah, I just say the other mum. And yeah, I think thankfully my other mum has got quite used to me saying that now. But yeah, like yeah, people find it weird when you don't have the really standard mom dad. So
Hmm.
it's lots of fun.
What does your
Um,
daughter call you and your wife?
at the moment, we're both mama. Really, she doesn't really differentiate
Oh, right.
uh,
She's still so young. Yeah.
a little. But we use mummy for me, really, and mama for my wife. So there's
Hmm.
not massive change there. But I've literally always said I'll just end up going with whatever she calls us, because that's what I did. I called Gaggy Gaggy because it was what I blurted out as a baby, and they went with it. So
That's so
it'll probably be quite similar, really.
funny.
She looked at my wife when she was little and said "Dada," and my wife was like, "No, we're not doing that." So it's like, I'm not being Dada.
Like, how do you even know what that is? Yeah.
Like she chose. But yeah, names are an odd thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's cool. I mean, that it's a different, it's like the modern sort of family. Like your
Yeah, yeah. It's not
your
boring.
sperm donor grandpa and your sperm
Yeah.
donor, like that'd be fun. Like,
I've got a book that we made for my daughter for Christmas. It's like a board book, and it says like "People Who Love Me," and it's got pictures of all of us in it, so she can throw it about. But I put in a picture of my donor because she has that relationship here with him, and technically he's her biological grandfather. And I put the picture in it, and I was editing it online, and I sent him a message saying, I don't know what to call you in this, because everything else I put like grandma, mum, like nana, and I was like, so in it's got his name, and then brackets biological grandfather and then mum's donor.
Right. Yeah, like
Not as long. I was like, it's there. I was like, I like the idea of a positive association of the word donor already. I thought if we have that in there.
uh-huh.
But yeah, it's not simple. Even me and him are still trying to navigate what we
The
call each other.
names, yeah.
He casually sort of said like, oh, my children, and that made me feel dead weird because you're like, well, we're not your kid. I'm not a kid. Like, it's fine for my mum to say child, you know what I mean? Like, but you've
Hmm.
never known me as a child, you never knew me when I was a kid. So
Yeah, that is weird to come
it's a
into.
learning process. I think it will just always change and adapt, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it is weird. Yeah, like to refer to, yeah. I don't know if I've ever noticed my donor father saying my
Mm.
daughters or my sons. Like I feel like I don't know if
Yeah,
he's ever said that. It's
yeah, my
interesting
donor
though. It's sort of
operates like
true, but like also not true.
that's the thing, it isn't, you're not lying. Like, but
Right.
it feels sort of, yeah, like you're not there. Well, how long have you known your donor personally?
I was 15
Right.
when I found him just by like kind of going rogue and like using some of these like random details and googling
Yeah,
stuff, and it took me like half an hour and I was like, that is the man. Like
that's a 15-year-old for you. That's a
right, yeah, exactly. And
fine.
I like wrote him a letter and like was like, well, he'll answer, like having no concept of like he could be like a horrible person or want nothing, and also like you're not supposed to do any of this. But
No,
he
no, no.
luckily was very like, hey, like, and he had actually known one of my half sisters
Oh,
for
right.
for years at that point, through this like very coincidental bizarre situation that he ends up
Wow.
finding her. So he was kind of used to the idea already, and like
Yeah.
his son that he raised had been interacting and introduced to my half sister who was 9. So
Right.
they had kind of grown up together. It was kind of like
Yeah.
cousins, which is interesting,
Oh,
like
okay.
half siblings through being a
Yeah.
sperm donor. I don't know.
Mm.
So it
Well,
was.
I'm navigating the kind of idea now of introducing siblings for my daughter young, or whether I
Mhm.
let her wait till 18. And I think it's been a strange thing to try and figure out. Because I kind of always had just gone, yeah, she'll find out at 18. That's what I did. But
Mhm.
then I'm like, but she doesn't need to. There's so much information out there now. There's a WhatsApp group that's just been set up specifically for the clinic we used, for people to
Oh.
go, this was my donor, the donor we used, this is the profession. Has anyone got the same one?
Oh,
Um,
right. Because it doesn't
and
have to be such a mystery because
no,
you're all around this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's the thing. But then I was like, and so we were saying it would just be nice to know if there are any, and then we can take it from there when she starts asking. But my dog just doesn't want to sit still apparently. But yeah, I think it's that wanting an option. I think because we didn't get options, you just got what you were given. So it would be nice to give an option, but it's
Mhm.
still quite scary, the thought of it. I don't know. It's sort of
Yeah. It kind of depends on what you foresee or want, but I guess maybe it's not such about what you want, what she would want out of a relationship with a
yeah,
sibling or a half sibling. Like I feel differently about my brother, who is my full sibling and that I grew up with, than I do about these 10 other people that are
okay,
my half siblings. And
same.
not, but just because it's different because you grew up together. But I do feel like it was helpful. Like I think it would have been more overwhelming if at 18 I was like, okay, here are the 10 people, and like,
Yes.
you know, contact all of them and like see what happens. Like it was helpful kind of having them added in slowly over time. Like I was 8 when I met
Right.
my
Okay.
one half sister because both of our parents signed us up for the donor sibling registry,
Right.
and so our parents like, a play
Did you
date.
like that? Did you like kind of know them?
Yes, yes, it
That,
was like,
yeah.
yeah, I found that so. I don't know if I entirely understood it in the beginning
That's always the
of like
question, I think,
like
really. Yeah.
I think we must have, especially meeting her for the first time, because it was like, you look like me, like we're like a month apart and we like really look
Oh
similar.
wow.
So I don't
Yeah.
think that I thought it was just a family friend. Like I feel like I
No.
knew, I don't know, maybe it's kind of cousiny,
Yes, that's a good vibe. I think it's knowing you're related, so there's a slight upgrade from friend.
random person. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really what I just want to have as the, she might reach sort of 6, 7, 8 when we start talking about properly, and she might have absolutely no interest.
Mm-hmm.
But I hate the idea of her sort of one day out the blue going, I really regret that you didn't do this. And I'm like, shit, we could have. Like, it's sort of, but I think it's a different world now. There is so much out there online, and there are so many ways of doing that. And there wasn't for me as such, in that, like, I still don't know the rest of mine. And I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't even know where to begin digging, because even half my half siblings that I have found, they don't know where the number is, or any, the donor number and stuff like that. So it's yeah, it will, I think it will just be something we figure out as she gets older.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. But at least there are lots of lots
yes,
of
there's
options and
many
ideas and
options.
people that have thoughts and
Yes, yeah, which
yeah.
is sometimes more overwhelming. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
thoughts out there.
Yeah.
My parents just had their thoughts, and that was kind of it. But yes, we have every possible thought on the internet as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about that. Something I read of like humans were not created to have access to each other's thoughts and
No,
like
that's very true.
like we're just supposed to interact with our little tribe of people and now we
Not
have
meant
this
to 20
machine
million
that we can
people.
contact it's like
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm not meant to sit and scroll and read 20,000 people's thoughts, especially people that I don't know as well.
uh-huh. Yeah, but
That wasn't normal. That's not what we were meant to do.
uh-huh. It's interesting. Well, well, thanks for
Uh,
talking. This was fun.
yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been really interesting talking about something similar, but still sort of countries apart. But yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
I better go see if my child has gone to sleep with my wife.
yes.
Whether she has or not, I don't know. But we'll see. But no, thank you very much for having me. And
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
brilliant podcast. I'm really enjoying it. So
Oh, yay, okay.
yeah, keep it up. I know that it's for your college.
Yeah,
That you
it's the
have
I
there.
don't know the difference between what I know.
So-
The thing you do after you go to high school, the
yeah.
4 years of that. Yeah.
Oh.
It
What year
started
are you
as
in?
that. I'm a senior, so I'll graduate in May.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it started as that because I took this class and I found it so interesting and my
Yeah.
professor was like, you absolutely have to do it about this and whatever. So I started doing it and it was just kind of talking to like my siblings and my donor, etc. And then I found this whole Facebook group and I was like, well, I really like doing the editing of it and the all of that. And I was like, what if I just talk to other people? Like, and it just kept going. So the class is over. Like,
Yeah.
the grade
But
is
it
over,
is with a kind of, yeah, it's stemmed from that, and it's just grown. It's good.
hmm.
Yeah,
So
no, I'm
yeah, we'll
enjoying
see how see
it.
what
Yeah.
happens.
Well,
Yeah.
no, thank you very much.
Yeah.
All
All
right,
right.
I'm sure I'll be in contact soon. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.
Okay, that was my conversation with Freya. Special thanks to her for sharing her story, and I'll see you next Thursday. Bye.